with David being down, everybody's going to slide into different spots, and we have to cover, we have to cover innings where those guys are going to have to, kind of step up into different roles. Everybody's going to have to kind of step up into different roles, and today we just had a ton of hard contact.
Ton of hard contact. Good morning, everybody. Pirates fall, and it's the danger zone. 2.5 games back in the wild card race, 8.5 games back in the division. This is my final show for the next 2 weeks. I have more paternity leave to use. I intend to use all of it. And I am concerned, Dorin, that when I come back 2 weeks from now, the Pirates will be like 6 or 7 games back in the wild card race. All of a sudden, the Cardinals are hot, and real quick, the Pirates are not. Bailey Falter, no good yesterday. Nick Gonzalez, who struck out at the end, went 0 for 5. He's 1 for his last 24. Derek Shelton talked about the bullpen without David Bednar, which also did not bathe itself in glory yesterday. And I think the season right now, Mr. Dickerson, is teetering. Agree? Disagree? Questions, comments, concerns?
I agree. After that loss and the way that they lost last night, I just, like, even if you do add something, I feel like, I know it's a total 180 for us. Yesterday we were riding high and like, hey, if you do this, if you add this, if you do that, you have a chance. You're still in the thick of things. I just don't see how they could get better. I really don't. Not one guy, not two guys, not three guys is going to do that. And this goes back to the beginning of the season for me. It really does, because you knew that Skeens was going to come up at some point. You didn't know what Jones was going to be. You knew what Mitch Keller was. You're hoping O'Neal Cruz was going to have a decent year. You brought McCutchen back. You paid Reynolds, obviously. Why didn't you make the necessary moves in the offseason? You did patchwork moves, and you thought that was going to work. But any real team gets real players to go out there and to go out there and provide the production that they need, and that's where it starts. And we're all clamoring to this trade deadline. Make a move, add a bat, add this, add that. They should have did this in the beginning of the year.
Yep.
Why do we wait until now? Like, anticipation is one of the biggest words and biggest things in sports, whether it's on the field or off the field. Now, you should anticipate that a guy like Skeens was going to bring what he's bringing to the table whenever he was going to be called up at some point. Anticipate being good instead of just being mediocre.
Yeah.
And if you anticipate being good, you do and make the right moves and add the right pieces. The pieces that they added are mediocre.
Yes.
Like,
If that.
if that.
Maybe.
That's where I'm at. That's why it's frustrating for me, is because we are talking about all this stuff whenever it could have been alleviated in the beginning of the year if they would have just made the right decisions and spent some money to get legit players.
It doesn't even have to be don't pay Aroldis Chapman, don't pay Rowdy Tellez, and instead get Rhys Hoskins. The afternoon guys talked about that yesterday. You don't even have to go that far. Just don't sign Rowdy Tellez and bring back Carlos Santana.
Exactly.
Carlos Santana wanted to be a Pirate. Carlos Santana was a Gold Glove finalist last year. When he was moved to Milwaukee, he said he would welcome a return to Pittsburgh in the offseason, and the guy's got double-digit home runs this year, and he's one of the better defensive first basemen in the entire sport.
Yep.
I put an S at the end of first baseman. I'm too jacked up about it. And Rowdy Tellez, he's having a good June. Not anymore. 0 for 4 last night. He stinks. Connor Joe is Connor Joe again. Key Brian Hayes is hitting 226. Edward Olivares is hitting 240. Jack Sawinski in the lineup, 172. Yasmani Grandal went 86. All of these guys stink. And you're right. The general manager has to eat it because he was given $35 million to spend, and he spent it poorly. I spilled coffee again.
Oh, my goodness.
What'd that guy write in Barrett Sports Media yesterday? Crowley is passion personified. I'm a wheeling dervish or whatever whirling dervish. I knocked the damn coffee over. I'm all pissed off because, man, I think you're right. The more you watch this club, the more it crystallizes, at least in my head. Do they need to add? Yes, and they should absolutely add no matter what's about to come out of my mouth here. They are not 1 or 2 players away.
No.
And you watched the game last night, and Brian Reynolds is on fire.
Yes.
On fire. Andrew McCutchen is a top 10 designated hitter in the sport. O'Neal Cruz has been pretty good. He's been pretty good, and last night he was really good. Apart from those three, I have no hope anybody else is ever going to come through in a clutch situation. How can you? And so you can add a first baseman, you can add a center fielder. Now you've got 5 guys. And with this starting rotation, maybe it gives you more of a shot. But they cannot fix all of their problems, unfortunately, at the trade deadline. And that's why when you're building a roster, it's easier to get players in the offseason than it is at the deadline. Prices are higher now. There's more teams invested because you are looking at it right in the face. Where are we in the standings? It's going to be tough for them to make all the necessary improvements. And I was asked on the Final Word Sunday night, how close are the Pirates to a playoff spot? And I said they're pretty close because you look at the NL and there's not a lot of good teams. This is when you're going to start to see some separation. And I am afraid you've got 5 games left on this road trip, 2 against Cincinnati, one of which Martin Perez is going to start. And then you go to Atlanta. Man, you can find yourself in a bad way in a hurry, and it's the danger zone, and I'm worried.
Kind of reminiscent of what the Steelers have done the last 3 years. I mean, with Finkner and hiring in-house and, even Butler at the time and Matt Canada, it's like, all right, we're going to make this work with the guys that we have here instead of going out and finding legitimacy. And, with Triolo playing and starting the year at second, and I was really high on him, but, having a legit player there instead of being like, you know what, we think that this guy could play this position. Like, he played multiple positions before, but, we think that we could stick him there, and then, okay, that solves our issue, so we don't have to get a second baseman. First base, outfield.
Oy.
It just...
They have one outfielder.
They have
Brian Reynolds.
Yes.
That's it. Connor Joe stinks. He's hitting 239, and stinks is probably too strong because he's a useful player.
You're relying on a 37-year-old player.
Is that
to be one of your best players?
Yeah, that's a huge indictment. Massive indictment.
And it's not an indictment on Andrew McCutchen.
No.
He is fantastic, and we all know that. I don't even have to go down that road. But you're relying on him to be one of your best players.
Yes. And he has been. Since May 11th, thereabouts, when they inserted him as the leadoff hitter, he's been their second best hitter. And that's only because Brian Reynolds, for the last 21 days, has been playing like an MVP candidate. But if Brian Reynolds were doing what Brian Reynolds had done the first couple of months of the season, Andrew McCutchen would be their best player. So I say, and we say, you can't add 1 or 2 pieces and fix everything. One thing they absolutely need to do is they need to fire Andy Haynes. Because we're talking about a bunch of guys that are struggling, a bunch of guys that stink right now. Well, you can't get rid of them all. You can't replace them all at the deadline. So what can you do to maybe jolt this thing? That would be something that I would look into. When Bob Nutting spoke for the first time in season ever and said the goal 100% is to make the playoffs, and then in his next breath said the offense stinks. Well, I think shots fired at Derek Shelton. I think shots fired at Andy Haynes. That would be my break glass in case of emergency thing. And I would do it right now. You're 4 games under. You're 2.5 back in the wild card. You're 8.5 back in the division. This thing could, right here, slip away. And I do think you've got to blame Andy Haynes for this. Some of this, at the very least, because Edward Olivares is a guy that had pop in Kansas City. Michael A. Taylor is one of the worst position players in all of baseball right now. He hit 21 home runs last year. Rowdy Tellez is not that far away, removed from hitting 35 bombs. Key Brian Hayes, a couple of years ago, was a 300 hitter. Last year for 2 months was really good. Now he's hitting 226. Jack Sawinski hit 26 homers. Like, there are guys that have all had success before that are having less success now. And I don't know that it's all Andy Haynes' fault, but if everyone is struggling, you can't replace them all. I think he cut the head of the snake off.
Yeah, it's just too much of a drastic regression.
Yeah.
And it's been like this. They've masked over a little bit this year for like a month and a half, but it was like this at a huge point in the season, and now it's back again. And you're just wondering, okay, you look around, and we could blame the players, and you say that we don't have quality players here in Pittsburgh, but if everybody is doing it, to me, that points to one direction or 2 directions, and it's usually the position coach or the manager.
And the manager is an offensive guy.
Yes.
He's a hitting coach by trade. So he's not doing a good job. And from what I understand, he's actually pretty hands-off. Well, time to get hands-on. I don't blame him as much for the lineup construction. I know we talked about it yesterday, and we talked about it in that final game of the St. Louis series. But the reality, unfortunately, is you don't have a lot of players that are hitting well. And so, yeah, lineup construction matters. But if we're complaining about Connor Joe not being in the lineup, it's a bad roster.
Yes.
When we're talking about, Andrew McCutchen not being able to, at 37 years old, take a day off or they're not going to be able to hit, that's a roster construction issue, right? If we're talking about Nick Gonzalez not being in the lineup, although he should have been, who was 1 for his last 19 going into the final game of the last series, if we're talking about, oh my God, you need him to be in the lineup, again, 1 for 19 and now 1 for his last 24, you probably have roster construction issues. So they have many. The GM didn't do a good enough job this offseason. The hitting coach isn't doing a good enough job right now. And, well, Derek Shelton, a hitting coach by trade, obviously is not pushing the right buttons there.